Thanks. It's thrilling to be here with all of you, and I'm extremely excited about what all's happening these days, and I'd like to maybe take you back to 1982, Berkeley, California, first, where my office mate was Eric Schmidt. Maybe you've heard of him, and Bill Joy was my buddy around the corner, and it was all happening there at Berkeley, and the only thing was that the government was sending letters to the IEEE and to the ACM saying, don't have sessions on cryptography, and certainly no conferences on cryptography because you'll be violating all kinds of laws and you'll go to prison. And so, being a clear-thinking graduate student at the time, I decided the thing to do was to organize a conference on cryptography and invite everybody that I could find. And not only that, when everyone was seated in a room, it was at the beach, so I can't say it's a lot like this, but a similar venue. I announced that, the people in the front row all mysteriously had signed up with their personal addresses, and they were all in Laurel, Maryland. Mysteriously, there were a lot of amateur cryptographers based in Laurel, Maryland. And so when I said, by signing up and paying your $100 in those days registration fee, you're now all members of the International Association for Cryptologic Research, they all turned green. And then I announced the following spring there would be a conference in Udine, Italy, and so forth, and we had elected board and officers and all that sort of thing. So it's a freestanding entity. So it's kind of like a Satoshi moment, if you will. The existing powers that be really weren't doing their job. So we had to sort of take matters into our own hands. And so ICR is the Association for Cryptologic Research, and it's the main organization. We publish a journal. We've got 3 conferences every year, 6 workshops, roughly speaking. There's nothing else like it, and it's still a freestanding entity with enough money in the bank to run all of its conferences for a year, even if no one comes. So it's in pretty good shape. But this didn't seem to be enough, because it turned out that the government thought it was a neat trick to say, well, if you want to standardize cryptographic algorithms, then the National Institute of Standards should do it. And of course, they have a close working relationship with our friends at the National Security Agency. There may be some typos in these slides, and I apologize for that, but you can probably fill in the blanks. So what I did is I founded a project that performed open reviews. So after AES came out with a hidden backdoor review by the National Security Agency, didn't really look that good to me. I thought we need open public reviews for cryptographic standards, and indeed we found problems with things that had been approved through the official channels. So whenever you hear someone use the term strong cryptography, think back, what does it really mean? We may have lost that because this RIPE project is no longer running, and we're relying on our friends in the government to tell us what's a good compromise of security and efficiency. And if you don't understand that, read David Kahn's book on cryptography. You'll see that historically governments have always done a thing like that for their own advantage. and that's a longer subject. But I didn't come here to talk about that. Of course, I'm here to talk about electronic money. That's why we're all, partly, that's how we got started, being so excited about all this possibility of a distributed world. And how many of you remember how blind signatures work? Whoa. All right, I see no one. So that's, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm going to stand over here. I hope the lighting is okay, because I need to use the laser pointer. So basically, I can explain blind signatures using a paper analogy. Hope everyone can you see this over there? Okay. So, and probably you don't even remember what carbon paper was. It's a kind of black paper that if you write near it, it transfers black stuff to other things. And so the individual person who may have account number 762 at the bank would put a piece of carbon paper, a piece of plain paper inside an envelope, send it to the bank, and ask the bank to withdraw $1, say, from their bank account, 762's account, and in exchange, the bank should put a validating stamp on the outside of the envelope saying that whatever's inside is worth $1. And so what happens is that later, when you want to make a payment for $1, you discard the envelope and the carbon paper, and now you have that piece of paper that was inside that no one has ever seen before. It's like a random number that you made up, but it has the bank's, say, digital signature on it, so that when you pay it at the shop, they can, as say their shop number 314, they can deposit it to their account, and the bank can make sure it never saw that same piece of paper, prevent the double spending, and know that the payment was valid. So what this dashed boundary line shows is that these two transactions are unlinkable. And in fact, we can prove mathematically that they're unlinkable, information theoretically, even with infinite computing power, provided you're able to solve the traffic analysis problem. In other words, not see who's sending from which IP address. A little detail like that got a lot of people in trouble. So this is another point I'd like to make. Don't be an idiot, don't be fooled. If the systems you're working with don't do a really good job of hiding the IP addresses and the like, payload sizes, timing, and so forth, then you might as well just be sending your messages in the clear to the government. Okay? Keep that in mind. So what did I do with this idea? Well, nothing for a long time. But we'll come back to that. The first concrete thing was I was asked by the Dutch government to make a system that would allow road tolls to be paid using this. In 1 meter of road travel at 100 kilometers an hour from a smart card, and that's in an in-car unit. And we successfully delivered that in 10 days. A real e-cash privacy-protecting payment with the software on the smart card and everything. And the team that did that got the reward to go to Disney World for 2 weeks with their girlfriends, all expenses paid. And that team then became the core developer group at DigiCash. And so when the first World Wide Web conference came up, they were looking for keynote speakers, and they chose 2. And mine was first. And next time you come to an event where I'm speaking, I hope I can show you the video clip I recently found of me making the world's first e-cash payment from Geneva to Amsterdam from the podium at that conference. but we don't have time for that right now. But I do want to show you, the eCash. These are some screen captures from the original eCash for the 386. Yeah, look at that. These are back in the very early days. So we really built eCash, the complete system, and these are some of the folks that built it, and you can also see the, you see these icons? Those are the places you could spend our Cyberbucks, which was a digital currency that we created. And if you signed up, you get 100 Cyberbucks, airdrop, whatever you want to call it. And these merchants were really selling real stuff for Cyberbucks. If you go to my website, Chaum.com, that's not that hard to remember, is it? Chaum.com, you scroll down, you'll see the DigiCash project, and click on the link, and you can see, when you click roll over these and then click on the text, it'll take you back to the web page of those merchants, and you can actually see it. And then you could click on all these like press releases and stuff that we did back in the day. It's all resurrected by a very dedicated person named Sydney, who I'm grateful to for having done this. Now, later, we decided to issue, or let's say, let banks and others issue eCash. And so, for example, Deutsche Bank, which was the largest bank in Europe, had a little better reputation then than it does now, decided at the board level, they wanted to issue eCash in Deutschmarks in those days, if you realize how long ago that was. And, they wanted it running in the bunkers with backups and all the management stuff that so they made us, it was a little much, but we did it. And we had super German underground industrial strength eCash running in Deutschmarks. Advanced Bank was running it out of Australia. We had a division in Australia. We had a bunch of other licensees around the world. It was issued in US dollars by Mark Twain Bank, who's now merged into some other bank, and Nomura had licensed it, and so on and so forth. So we had a lot of traction while I was running the zoo. Let me just tell you about another Satoshi moment that I had. So we were running some elections. Now, to me, there are really two key parts of this whole distributed, what I will call digital sovereignty issue. One is the sort of electoral, that's sort of voting, and one is a sort of economic. Now, you might think, oh, voting, that's for governments, what does it have to do with distributed? Well, that's kind of what I thought when I was doing this. We ran these elections in 2009, 2011, the full city election, mayor, city council, everything for Tacoma Park, Maryland. That's a real incorporated city. From the air, it looks like part of Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And we surveyed every person, and every third person was asked by a professional interviewer an open-ended question, we've documented. People loved it, and it costs way less than any voting system run in this country. Used all commercial off-the-shelf equipment, no special hardware, and it was the first. You might want to call it a blockchain election. I would call it a publicly verifiable election. Okay, anyone could look online and see that their vote was counted and that it was counted correctly, and that only correctly counted votes were included in the tally. And even an adversary with unlimited computing power who could break cryptographic algorithms couldn't mess with the integrity of that. And it was a much less expensive and fun way to do voting. And so I thought, wow, just like when I published the stuff about eCash, I thought, well, all kinds of people will, banks and companies will all want to issue it to get a competitive advantage and help their consumers and all that. But nope, it just happened again. Same thing. Election officials could care less. They were not interested just because it cost less. But voters liked it more. We proved that. The government paid for us to prove that. No, they were uninterested. This is when it dawned on me. This was my Satoshi moment. Wait a minute. Again, second one, or third one. Elections are too important to be left to government. We need to find a way to route around and let the public at least express its will. And so I developed a system called random sample voting. You'll read about it on my website if you go to chaum.com and you look, and you will see more details than you care probably to know about. But we the first binding election for this was at the World Forum for Democracy that was held at the Council of Europe, by the Council of Europe, under the auspices of the Council of Europe. And we were invited to run the election on the delegates' agreement on the conclusions of the event. So there are 2,000 people in this beautiful wooden building, purpose-built there for this thing, and we did it, and it worked perfectly. And so now we have technology to allow people to run elections without having to ask for permission. So I think that's really very significant. Oh, how many people remember this slide? Oh, well, more people that remember blind signatures, but not that many more. I thought this was pretty interesting. When this came out, what this basically said is that, oh, gee, there's like 100,000 people who work for the government in the intelligence world secretly, and they all know this, but no one ever told us this. That all the big companies, you see their names there, Google, Facebook, Skype, Apple, Microsoft, hey, they're all happily giving all their data to the NSA and those nice folks. All your data, but what kind of data? Well, here's a list right from the government itself. Let's go to email, chat, videos, phones, stored data, VoIP, file transfers, video conferencing, and so on. And then, of course, special requests. So, I'm not sure what that is. So, I found this to be profoundly disturbing because I'd spent a career trying to help people have control over their own informational lives, what I call digital sovereignty. Okay, I've been working on it for decades, and so this was in the spring. A couple months later, I show up in Santa Barbara at the crypto conference that I founded. That's the main event every year, the one in the U.S. So we had about 600 people, most of which I knew, because I've been in the field for such a long time. So I started asking them, hey, what do you think about this Snowden thing? Just came out in the news a couple months ago. They're like, oh yeah, well, didn't you know it? Some of them said, oh, you were right, David, all along. But I never really was sure what was going on. That's when I realized, academics aren't the people you can count on to use cryptography to create digital sovereignty, to create the new world, which we now are getting the sense we can create. Okay, they're like the philosophy professors that would, they don't go home and ponder metaphysics. It was a real eye-opener. I couldn't find anyone there who was really concerned about it. I was shocked. I'm sure people go home and tell their kids, that they're doing good things for the world. But anyway, so I thought, man, this is just out of range. Unbelievable. The full take, every last bit. in perpetuity, globally, for all people, no matter what. So then I thought, well, what should I do? And I decided to come up with something new. And I've worked on it for a few years now, and it is, I believe, a way to do all the things we need to do, that is payments at Visa scale and beyond, privacy in messaging and identity, and so forth. Now, like as they say, I'm under NDA, I can't tell you the details right now. We're not ready to launch, but we're damn near ready to launch, and this is very, very exciting to me, and it took a lot of cryptographic heavy lifting. You know, I heard that Edward Snowden said that Monero was written by amateur cryptographers. I think if you look at what's out there, it's mostly pretty amateurish compared to the kind of stuff that we, that have been in the business from the beginning know how to do. So I think this is going to be something like you've never seen before, and it's going to be a dramatic sea change. So I'm really thrilled about it. So yeah, I put out the stuff in the past and said, look, here's how to do it. Why don't you companies and stuff do it? You can protect your consumers' privacy. It'll actually save you money. It won't really cost you anything. Your customers will be happier. This will be an advantage to you over other companies. I've made those arguments over and over again. I spent my own money traveling around the world pitching this, getting this stuff disseminated. Well, didn't work. So, in fact, I'm sorry again about the typos in this, but this is digital sovereignty. What I proposed in 1984, it appeared in several publications by invitation in various edited forms. You can see the original article on my website. It's very close to one of the German translations. I've paraphrased it slightly here, but essentially what I propose is two fundamental informational rights. Okay? This is one way to think of cyber sovereignty. It's that you are just as protected, powerful, valuable as your counterparty, whether that's another individual or a company or a government. So you should be able to protect your information, your rights, you sign contracts, have everything be secured, and so on, with data that you possess. And so that's the one dimension of cyber sovereignty, and there's a second, which is that you should never be required to reveal more information than is strictly necessary. And when you start to look at situations and ask yourself, what is strictly necessary information, it's a lot less than you've been led to believe, right? You don't, to get into the bar, someone doesn't need to know your address, your driver's license number, and your age. All they need to know is that you are above a certain age. That's just like one bit, right? They don't need to be able to link that with any other information. So that's an example. And so these fundamental human rights should translate across all aspects of society. So this is my email address, same as my website. If you write to me, mention this conference in the subject, I will answer you. I will be very happy to talk to you about any of these things if you like. And I just want to say that it's been an honor and a real pleasure and a thrill for me to be here with you all, and I hope we can sort of avoid, watch out for proof of greed. If we can do that, this is our big chance. We can really make this happen, and it's going to be a total blast. So I really look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much.